Welcome back to the Route 77 podcast. We are continuing our enlightening journey into the realm of masculinity. In this second part, we delve into the often discussed topic of toxic masculinity, aligning it with Christian values to understand its impact on society and individual lives. We'll dissect traits like aggression, dominance, and emotional suppression, and contrast them with the virtues of empathy, patience, and integrity. Stay with us as we navigate these complex themes and strive to define a more compassionate and balanced view of masculinity.
This is where fathers teach their children.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. This is why there's been so many studies on fatherless sons, like to actually see how much more detrimental it is for a son to not have a good role model as a father.
Yep. I know two boys whose father is a total, just because you can father children doesn't make you a father. And these two boys have zero respect for their father, and I can't blame them because he was never there for them. When he was there, all he would do is berate them, and then he would disappear again. What kind of a father is that? If you cannot be a father, don't have children. If you cannot be there for your children to raise them and to guide them and to teach them, don't become a father.
And don't put that on the woman.
And don't put that on the woman. A woman,
100% on.
Women can be great mothers, and a lot of women do the male-female roles. But my best friend Michelle, I'm sure she would even agree that she wished that her son's father would have had a little bit more involvement in her son's life, that maybe it would have helped him. Because as great a job as she did in raising her son, he lacked that father figure in his life.
Yes.
From what people have said and from what I've observed, there's like a distinct disconnection between how a mother raises her children and how a father raises the same children. There's something that the mother provides the father can never provide, no matter how hard he tries, and vice versa. There's something that a father can provide that a mother cannot provide. It's just something that God embedded in the roles.
And I think that's why it's like super important that if you are a single parent, that you try to I'm not saying get married for the sake of providing a parent for your child. I'm saying put into your child's life people of good character and even mentor of the gender that they're missing as a parent.
Yeah.
So they can see good role models for it and they can experience.
Yep. Yeah. So if you're a single father, finding a woman who can give some of that nurturing care, and it could be an aunt, it could be their grandmother, it could be
just somebody in the church, like
somebody in the church
involved with. That's why I think it's good sometimes to have two genders doing youth ministries.
Yeah, and especially like for single fathers, if you have a daughter that you are raising, there are going to be times when only a woman is going to be able to explain to your daughter what is happening to her body as she grows up. And if you can't give, because as great of a father as you are, it's going to be really hard for you to explain something when you are not the gender she is, because she's going to think, well, you just don't understand because you're a guy.
If you've never been through it, it's harder to explain to this particular thing. Same as a guy to try to explain, or a woman trying to explain it to the boys.
It happened to one of the guys, one of my coworkers. He's married, has a son and a daughter, and his son had little boys have this thing that happens to them, and it happens to every guy where it just has a mind of its own, that little thing they have. And his wife, you know what I'm talking about. So his wife phoned up the dad and said, "You're going to have a talk with your son." She knew that no matter how she tried to explain to her son, he was not going to understand because she's mom. So she had to turn to dad and say, "You have to have a talk with your son about how the body works for a boy." So he did. He explained to his son that it was completely normal. You don't need to go and have to do anything. It'll do its own. Just leave it alone. And it was good. We all had a good chuckle about it. That's the example. Mom, as much as a good mom you are, to be able to explain that to your son sometimes you just need a guy to say, hey, it's okay, dude.
Yeah.
And same
Smart
with,
guy.
and the same for a girl. Yeah, it's important to, if you don't have to get married to find that, like you said, finding a mentor that will help them in that area will be, or even just somebody in the church or.
But if you're, yeah, this is why too, it's really important to be active in the church where you're
Yep.
going and you're being involved in the community, because then there will be those role models around. They will see men and women interacting. They will see men of good character. They will see women of good character and understand and slowly learn and understand what that looks like.
Yep. And they're also speaking to the single parents. There are so many support groups that you can access that can help you navigate going through life as a single parent, because it's not easy, because you've got to juggle work and home life without having somebody there to spot you off. And it can be very exhausting.
Yeah. So anything else to add to strength and dignity, David?
No.
Oh, we're good. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed.
We
He
mentioned
talked
this
about
earlier.
this, yeah.
But it's good to go back to this, because I think it cannot be stressed enough about setting aside time to be with God, to read his word, because you're not going to know how to live out his word if you don't read it.
And you won't be a man like God if you are not a man of God.
Exactly. And we all know that a godly man is,
It has to come from inside. It's not going to come. You can fake it on the outside and people can fall for it, but ultimately it will crumble.
yeah. Yeah. In close quarters, when you're working with somebody enough, there's a really good way to tell how godly a man is when he changes time. Because if he hasn't cultivated that goodness, kindness, patience, perseverance, and he raps his knuckles on the pavement because he can't get that nut off to change the tire, and he's swearing a blue streak, going, you might want to read that. But that also goes towards his character too. He said, if you want to know what kind of a man you're dealing with, have him either put together IKEA furniture, set up a computer, or change a tire. Because any one of those kind of things will test his level of patience.
But it's just so Jesus actively spent time with his Father.
Yes.
It wasn't just happenstance, and it wasn't, I got 2 minutes. He purposely set it aside. He went when he could be alone. He got up early. He's God, but he's still a man, so he probably wished he could sleep a little bit longer, but he took the
His
time.
bedroll was nice and warm. It's
Yes,
cold out
it's
there.
cold, but he took that time to go and spend the time with his Father. If that's not an example, like Jesus lived everything as an example to others, like too. So there's nothing that we can go, oh, just don't do it like Jesus. No, do it like Jesus.
Yeah.
If you're when in doubt, do it like.
That is one of the things that still puts awe in my mind every time, is that there is nothing that I can't think of that Jesus somehow demonstrated throughout his life. And he didn't even live a life like we do. He lived to 35 or some
30.
young age. He
Yeah.
didn't live till 80. And he was able to demonstrate what a person should live like in such little time.
Yeah, I never really thought that Jesus was younger than me at the moment. Like I've never really thought about it. Like going, wow, where was I at 33 in my mid 30s?
Amber is 33. So that really hit home to me, because that was the first thing that came to mind. Was Amber is the same age as Jesus when he was sent to the cross. That's way too young. It's way too young.
It doesn't mean that it's, oh, you'll be like that when you get older. No, it develops, starts young, starts as a boy.
Yeah. Train a child in the way they shall go, and when they are older, they will not depart from it.
Jesus was able to accomplish everything he did, even in human form, even when he was lesser than the angels at the time. He was able to accomplish all this as a human in such a little time. And it exhibits the patientness. It exhibits how patient, merciful, and compassionate God is, because he gave us such a long time. And even in the Old Testament, 900 years. That's how patient God is.
Yeah.
So we should exhibit that kind of patience, that kind of principle
There,
while others.
I will caution our listeners. One of the things that I remember in my earlier prayer life is that I would pray for patience. God, give me patience. Don't ever pray that prayer like that, because God will do everything and anything to test your patience, and maybe even the devil if he's got a mind to, because it's not your patience that you want, it's God's patience. So the better prayer is, Lord, give me your patience, your love, your heart for the lost, for the people that you love, which is everybody. Because it's not about me, it's all about him.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like I said, it's something we develop over time. We don't just go, oh, someday in the future.
Yeah, no. If that someday never comes. There's a saying, you can't go back to yesterday. Tomorrow never comes, so you might as well live today.
You're full of sayings today.
Am I full of sayings today? I must have got some sleep or not.
Is that everything for that topic for now, David?
Yeah, that was covered.
And if you're having problems building up a spiritual discipline, like reading the Bible and praying, do what you and I did. Find a partner to sit down with at the same time.
You can do it on FaceTime.
You can do it on FaceTime. You don't have to live in the same house. And do a Bible reading. Go through the Bible. Like I can't believe how much of the Bible I have read this year that I have never read before. It's like, oh, I never knew that was in there. And prayer.
The prophets of the Old Testament.
It's amazing.
Once read those.
And we're sitting there going, wow, there really is nothing new, because I think we're going through this very thing right now in our society.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool. Not really, because it is history.
Cyclical.
Cyclical, yeah.
So our next verse is Matthew 6:19-21. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
Yeah, this is a good one. I like this one.
This one I really like. And I think it's something that needs to be really pushed, because it's very difficult to figure out what kind of recognition and what kind of rewards you're actually seeking.
All you have to do is go on social media and see how many people are posting things just to get their, they get, oh, I know. And it's amazing because they get, look at me and look at what I'm doing, and I'm doing this. And it's
even when you get your memories on Facebook, like this, on this day, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, you're going, wow, okay. It was like, it's not so exciting now or whatever.
I get my cousin's daughter's wedding that she hasn't been with that guy. She's been with 3 other guys since him. And that was their wedding day. I guess I'm not going to be sharing that memory. But it's funny, the amount of, even you've got people who they're showing off, like, and you can dress like this and you do your makeup like this. And it's all a lot of me. So this whole social media with TikTok and YouTube videos and even
Instagram,
where it just, look at me, see what I'm doing. I am so important.
try to become famous.
Try to become famous. And a lot of people do, surprisingly.
Yeah.
Like
weirdest things.
Yeah. Like that one guy, Stevio, who does the ER things. He was an ER nurse and has not had to work in a year because the amount of money he makes on his TikTok videos. And now he does comedy tours. He does stand-up comedy. He was a nurse in the ER. Now he's doing stand-up comedy. Okay, yeah, you're funny, but wow, that you gave up serving other people to serve yourself.
Yep. So one of the huge things that I think a lot of people they feel like they strive for rewards. I want to talk about rewards, because rewards is something that is really difficult and this goes for both the male and female roles in society. Effectively, what ends up happening is that we think we seek attention, like on TikTok and stuff, and we get those. But then what kind of values, what kind of personal attributes to your character does that instill? And because that's ultimately your reward. It ends up, what can you outside of TikTok exhibit to other people? That's the kind of reward you end up bringing to the table. That's the reward you'll end up getting. And that reward releases into an idea of recognition. Because the idea of a reward is that you get something in return for something you've done. And this differs slightly because it doesn't represent like, there's a separation between what Christ gifted us, because that isn't a reward, it was a gift. So the rewards that we will receive in heaven are the rewards we instill in our characters when we're on earth. So that comes out to being what people perceive us at to, because those are the things that will end up being retained when we are in heaven, is our characters and our attributes. And it will also determine who our rewards are in. Is it in the world or in Christ? Is our recognition going to be within Christ or in the world? And I think it's very important that we try to instill in young men that the proper idea behind what an actual reward is.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's interesting to see how many people try to get like Olympians.
Yeah.
Or even those who are going after Super Bowl rings and all these things.
Stanley Cup.
But whenever they get these things, they worked so hard for. And then you'll talk to like athletes and be like, oh yeah, my medal's in a drawer somewhere.
Yeah.
Or they get football player, they win so many Super Bowl rings, and then they're like,
it just doesn't mean anything.
But it doesn't, what they thought that was the epitome of everything. And then they got it and then realized either like, now what? Or wait, there's more to life than this. And it's just, and I think, yeah, so there's a verse that talks about, I can't remember, it's like, when you receive the praises of men, then you got your reward. But you do things in secret, and then the reward is in heaven. That's, you do things for other people see it, and they praise you for it, you've received a reward.
There's that verse too where Jesus talks about you pray on the street corner so that everybody can see your good deeds. Instead, go into your closet and pray to your Father where He sees your heart instead. Because it's more important for God to see your good deeds, which are true, than to be fake and phony and show good deeds.
But even if it's true, like you're doing these things, there's still a part of you that craves that attention.
The attention.
And to be recognized for it here. And yeah, like God's saying, yeah, if that's what you want, like that'll be the recognition you get. But ultimately there's a more important one. And that's why it's so hard when you see people like when they're getting, oh, this person or this company is given like millions of dollars to this charity, and it's just, there's this big pomp and circumstance over it, and you're like,
it was a tax grab.
Yeah, but at the same time you're like, you got your reward.
Yeah.
Was that? But then there's probably are people who are millionaires and whatnot who give their stuff away, and they don't tell everybody.
They don't tell everybody. No, they don't tell anybody. They just go and they just do it because it's what they want to do. There was this where if you ever won the lottery, what would you do with all that money? You can't really go.
I've thought about this. I've thought about it. If I won the $150 million lottery, what would I do with all that?
Oh my gosh, $150 million. What would you do with that kind of money anyways? Yeah, I know. It's fun to walk down that lane. I'd pay everything off. I'd give money here, there, and everywhere. And so much. The church actually does not want that kind of money because it's ill-gotten gains. You did not earn it in a respectful manner.
The thing is, though, too, is I've calculated how much you can live off of. And if you want to live off like $8,000, $10,000 a month, which is still a lot. It's about 10 million, I think, if you live 10. So it's 150 million. It's a lot of money. And you can do, it's just, yeah. I don't know. I thought about it.
I live on half of that. 8,000 a month.
Yeah, we won the lottery. That's what I feel like.
I get barely half that.
You should go into programming. Because you make that. Junior level instructor, you make around 6,000 to 8,000 a month.
On doing what?
Software development.
Yeah, not our jobs.
Not my job.
No.
My job don't make me that much. I'm poor boy.
But there's also an inherent thing that says, oh, you guys should get paid more, because there's, for example, construction workers probably should get paid 10 times more because they do stuff that really apparently needs to be done and they don't get paid enough to do it. Anyway.
We're all going about how much we don't get paid.
Okay, sixth verse, Luke 4:43. But he said, I must proclaim the good news of the kingdom of God to the other towns also, because that is why I was sent.
This one was interesting. This one was very interesting because entrepreneurship is more of a worldly thing.
Yes.
Yeah. So exhibiting an entrepreneurship within Christ ended up being spiritual, and it's spiritual entrepreneurship. For example, the ministry or the podcasts we do, we would instill a spiritual entrepreneurship because we have to run our own ministry and etc. So the idea behind this one was that we want to instill spiritually a way to young men that they're willing to learn and go out and create groups and communities that take a different kind of relationship. So instead of starting your own business and making a ton of money doing that and learning the business ropes, instead your focus is more instilling the values we discussed earlier by taking this role as an entrepreneur within the spiritual realm, within starting these communities. And I think the verse depicts something similar.
Yes. And that's the thing too. I think men will have an easier time to develop things, like you said, in a work-related business sense, in a spiritual ministry sense, because many of them will be like, well, I'm not a pastor, so why would I do that? Instead of understanding that these are qualities that we want, that should be passed down that's what he says, older men should help the younger men, older women help the younger women, like learning these things. And it's not just like how to be a businessman. It's also like taking the initiative and seeing it where there is a need, seeing that, like this guy we talked about with YouTube, he saw there was a need that for kids to learn things that they would normally learn from their dads. Just things like how to change a tire, how to change your oil, how to look at this, how to write a check, all those things. And he could just saw a need and he went and he met that need.
Yeah. That's what we've done as well.
Yeah.
Because we don't get anything for this.
No.
In fact, a lot of this comes out of our own pockets or out of your pocket. And yeah, poor Natasha. Good thing she makes the big bucks.
Yeah.
Miss
No
Money
less
Bags.
than the 8,000.
Less than the 8,000. But we saw a need to reach out because in this day and age, there seems to be a predominantly larger group of single people than ever before.
And a misunderstanding of singleness in
Yes.
general and within the church.
Yes, that too.
Yeah.
We saw a need.
Okay, and next one is Matthew 28:19-20. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age.
And this is where
So this one was cool. I liked doing this one because when we did the femininity one, when we did the one last week, I think you guys discussed legacy and the concept of like children and
Goes around.
So this one just takes a different approach on legacy. Instead of fathers raising kids, it depicts legacy as Jesus did his legacy with his disciples. So instead of children, he exhibited his children being not of his own blood or not being raised, but like everyone, both Gentiles, Samaritans, and Jews alike, and that his legacy was what he did on the cross and the salvation of the world. That's what his legacy was. And I think the verse depicts it quite well and so forth.
Yes. And I think it's really important, to step back and ask yourself, if I passed away today, what would my legacy be? What would be what people remember about me? Would it be that I ran a successful business or that I won 5 gold medals? Or like, even it's interesting to see a lot of these high-end athletes, like say like hockey players, stuff like that. It's actually when the ones that develop an association with the community, they help like the community youth or they put money towards that. That is what they become known for. And I believe there was one, I think it was the Montreal Canadiens. I can't remember the player's name, but he actually was traded off of there And it was actually I could be wrong on the team, but the team, like the fans, the people of the community were heartbroken when he got traded out, not because he was a good player, because he was, but because of the part that he had for the community and the help that he gave to the community. And so that was always interesting to me, is it wasn't because, oh, there goes a player that was good on our team. No, there goes like a person who was a heart of our community. And what is that legacy that you would leave? Are you a heart of your community for Christ? Is that what people will remember about you? And there's nothing wrong with having a good business and successful business and to getting into gold medals or whatever it is that you achieve. But if that is the limit of what you are known for, then maybe your priorities are a bit skewed.
And you don't have to be one of those who the whole world knows.
No.
But you have a group of people that you are constantly in contact with, whether it's through your business, through your church, or through community activities. When I was first going to Gateway, when it was still the small church on Holland Avenue, those who grew up in Abbotsford, who know Abbotsford, know what the church looked like. There was a guy who, from our church, who had passed away. He had gone up into around the Chilliwack Lakes area and had fallen off of a ravine into a pool. He couldn't get out, and he drowned, and they found him. The whole church was devastated. But he was one of those guys who worked very closely with the youth. He was always helping the youth. He was always doing things. When they had his celebration of life, the little church was made to hold 500 people. There was so many people in that church. They were standing in the aisles, along the walls, and in the back lobby. That's how many people came to honor this man's legacy as a community person who worked with kids, who was good in the community, who always did something. He left, and I still remember it to this day because I hadn't been going to that church for very long when that happened. And I was amazed at the amount of people that came to honor this gentleman. And he wasn't that old. He was probably about my age that I am now when he passed away, maybe even younger. And yeah, he went up there to take pictures, and it was very sad. And I remember how everybody was absolutely devastated, but how many people had to come to his service because they wanted to honor him. Now, that's the kind of legacy you want to leave.
Yes. So and I think that's, you have written here, David, that his legacy and influence continue to shape the lives of billions globally.
Mm-hmm.
That's the legacy that Christ left, is the legacy that he has through his children, which is all the believers, and that has expanded throughout the world and has impact in ways that people don't even realize.
Yep. And we could name a whole bunch of people that everybody knows. Corey Tenbo. She left an amazingly huge legacy when she had to, and she talks about it, when she came face to face with somebody, with a former Nazi, and with a former Nazi guard, and she had to forgive him and shake his hand, and she struggled, and she talks about that. Jim Elliot, he was a missionary. Yep. Who went to C.S. Lewis. Yeah, there's another one.
There's just so many people you could say, and those are people that are widely known.
Billy Graham.
If you went to individuals and you would ask them, individuals in the church, to say who had the most impact on your life.
Yep.
And there would be probably names that you've never heard of.
Yep.
But the impact they had it's like a drop of a stone in the water. Yep. It ripples out, and you don't know what you may not be. You never know what your impact would be. But if you're living for Christ, you're living in his example, then the legacy that you leave is going to be long lasting. It's going to be beyond this world into the next.
Yeah. You never know whose life you can touch. And a lot of those lives may be somebody who is not a believer yet. And what you do or what you say may be the turning point for that person. I don't know how many times I have heard somebody say, I was thinking of taking my life, but this person, for some reason, just came up and said something to me or did something that made such a difference. And I changed my mind. But now I've become a Christian and look at who knew. You don't know. Don't be afraid because you don't know whose life you might end up inadvertently saving for Christ, for God's sake. Yeah.
Exactly. So now that we've talked about what it is to be masculine,
Yes.
I think we should address the topic of toxic masculinity, because it is such a hot topic, hot button word, and men aren't sure what to do.
For our listeners who say, what do you mean by toxic masculinity? The definition in Journal of School of Psychology says the constellation of socially regressive masculine traits that serves to foster domination, the devaluation of women, homophobia, and wanton violence. Yes.
They're told that they can't be this, they can't be that, they can't be this. So many things that they can't be in this day and age that is toxic, and yet it doesn't have to be. Or the things that they're talking about don't have to be. So we'll go with your notes here, David. Toxic demeans emotional expression. A lot of people say that men don't cry. Real men don't cry. Real men don't show emotion. That Jesus wasn't a real man because he cried. One of the shortest verses in the Bible, Jesus wept. But he didn't just weep at the time when he was going to go for the cross. He wept for Lazarus before he raised him. He wept with those around him.
Yeah, and it's not just weeping. His heart was shattered when he went to Jerusalem and he saw that his covenant people were worshiping other pagan gods and stuff, and his heart was broken, and I have no doubt that he wept internally as well in that instance.
And we talked earlier about how he provided for his mother when he was dying on the cross. He put her in the care of John, and so he had compassion, he had emotions, and he did not use them in a negative way, but he was still he was a man.
Yeah.
He can express these emotions in many strengths, and I think that's one of the things we have to do for our youth is instead of depicting emotion all moments as weakness or cowardness, we can express them as a type of strength, as Jesus showed many times.
And I think, too, I would say that men and women show their emotions differently.
Oh, 100%.
So we have to remember that. So men showing emotion does not mean blubbering or I don't know what it is, or I don't know. It might be deep, wrenching, painful crying, but there's just a different way. So don't expect them to look like women.
Our demeanor changes. The way we react to something. It's not so much we bawl our eyes out, or it's the way we might end up. For me personally, sometimes if I'm in a foul mood or I'm upset or sad about something, I may do specific things slowly. It may take me like 2 minutes to get a glass of water or something, right? And it's also facial expressions mainly. It's not something that we outwardly express that people can just, oh, that person's sad. There might be a little bit of work to it.
Knows them more too, then you can see that. You see it more.
There's some with toxic math. There are certain traits that they talk about. So in modern society, people often use the term toxic masculinity to describe exaggerated masculine traits that many cultures have widely accepted or glorified. This harmful concept of masculinity also places significant importance on manliness based on strength, lack of emotion, self-sufficiency, dominance, sexual virility. So let's say a guy who has multiple partners, they praise that, but they call women something else entirely. The guy's got to get it from somewhere. Come on, people. There are certain toxic traits, whether you're masculine or feminine. Chauvinism is not just a man thing.
No.
Women can be just as chauvinistic.
But I think this one is because we're talking about toxic masculinity specifically.
But that goes under the toxic thing. Yeah, so strength, lack of emotion, self-sufficiency, and then they say dominance and sexual virility. We're just not going to worry about those because some of these traits that people call toxic, women are just as, if not more, because
Women tend to be more subtle.
yes, we can be a little bit more nasty because we can do it in such a way that you don't even realize you've been until you go, I think that was really me. And if you've ever seen women fight,
Yeah.
whew, because we don't, we pull hair, scratch, bite, punch where we're not supposed to, kick where we're not supposed to. I mean, we beat up men and say you can't be this way, but we ignore when the women are that way.
Yeah, it is a dual standard.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we're just taking what they call the toxic masculine traits and then saying, is this right? Or is this what God shows? So like another one is that the toxic masculinity is often equated with aggression.
Right.
That men are aggressive. And there's a difference between when we were talking earlier about strength and like being able to stand firm through things, have the know what boundaries are, those types of things. And then aggression, which is actually, it's more like you're stepping over lines. You're coming at people.
Yeah. If somebody is threatening your family,
Yeah.
then I really hope you are aggressive enough to throw that person away from your family and protect your family, because that's very important. As regardless of how many black belts we have, and we can defend ourselves. If we're in a situation that we can't, I really hope that there are some guys who will help us and not just say they can do it. They're girls, they're strong.
Yeah, there's a saying where I'd rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. But one of the key aspects in that saying is that the warrior's biggest strength is being able to sheathe his weapon in spite of being attacked. He knows when to unsheathe and sheathe his weapon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what Christ did. Like there was times when you saw I wouldn't say aggression, but like when he did turn over the tables of the money changers, they were desecrating not only the law, but they were desecrating his father's house.
Yep.
And so he took like that and he acted on it.
Yep.
And then there was
even when he called the Pharisees a brood of vipers.
Yes.
There was a reason for that. He wasn't just he was calling them out for their toxic attitude toward the other people, because they were holding themselves up as higher than everybody else. And he was calling them out. So these are, taking the example of how Christ dealt with certain situations, and he was never the passive aggressive.
But then he also stood back at times, like when Peter cut off the ear of the soldier, and he's just, no, this isn't the time for that.
Yeah.
And he stood back. There are times, like David said, there's times for peace. There's times when you don't attack. There's times when you leave your sword sheath, and there's times when you go.
Yeah.
And a good man will know what those times are and what the difference is.
Yeah.
Toxic masculinity is also often thought of as being hyper competitive. And yes, there is that sort of brutish side when you think that guys are just all trying to one up each other. And I think their competitiveness in itself is not wrong. There's good that can come from competitiveness. Sport. If nobody's competitive in sport, it's very boring.
No, you go. No, you go.
There was one time in a youth group, there weren't like a lot of kids and we're doing baseball. And all we did was took turns hitting the ball and then catching the ball. It was just really boring. It was not baseball. Like that was just, there was no point. There's pointless. But then there's the hyper aggressive. There are people who can be over the top. And
all you have to do is look at a hockey game when they all fighting
when they
each other.
fight, I have zero respect for fighting in hockey. That's just people not controlling themselves.
So my idea with this one was more like there's competitiveness in everything, but like having the hyper competitiveness within the same communities or the same families ends up resulting in calamity and the separation. Like they're fighting their own family.
No,
As Jesus said, that Satan can't, what do you call it? Satan can't fight against his own house. And the hyper competitive, yes, exactly. But the hyper competitiveness was more kind of leaning towards the idea that it's between each other. And so the idea was to incorporate team building in young men. so that we were able to mitigate that bridge.
Yeah, like that one person who steps on other people in order to get ahead of in the company. Right. You also see it when it comes to road rage, where people can't handle. There are stupid drivers out there. Deal with it. You're going to run. I've run into it, and David's been in the car, and he's every time I'm in the car with you, there are stupid people out there. He says, David, it's not just when you're in the car with me. What am I going to do? I'm going to chase them down and then beat the heck out of them. That's stupid. It's ridiculous. Stop being so taking things personally. The person driving like an idiot, that's just the way they're driving, and it's just not you personally. They're not targeting you.
No, they're just like that.
They're just like that. And whether it's your car or somebody else's car, it's just let it go. There's a song about that. Even like I see it in my own family, and it's been going on for years. There were where my mom and her sisters that not talk to each other for years. My brothers, they're doing the same thing. It's just the competitive.
Jesus said, "Let the first be last, and the last be first."
Yeah, when they're not. When they
Let no man think too highly of themselves. I think that's one of them too, is right.
Yeah. To be fair, I see, but I think even in Christian families, they're like this. My family's not Christian. So, they're going to fight. You guys just go and have your party. Come to me when you want to fight Jesus. I'll help you. But even in Christian families, we see that happening. Oh, I had a story. There was a story. I can't verify the truth of it. I'd heard about it not that long ago, where there was a marathon or some sort of a race, and the person in second behind the person in first, and knew that the person in first didn't understand the rules.
There was the way that they had marked the trail was wrong. So he had taken the longer route.
Had he taken the longer route?
He had gone where more than he should have.
That's not the story I know. He was coming. The person first was coming to the finish line and thought he had won and stopped before he crossed the finish line.
No.
And the person in second realized that the person in front didn't understand the rules because he spoke the wrong language or something like that. And he actually took the person that was supposed to be in first and pushed him ahead of him and pushed him across the finish line, because he knew had he not stopped, he would have been first. And rather than taking that first place and going, you lose, he took that person and pushed them over the finish line, because he knew that person was supposed to be first and that he was supposed to be second. That is good competitiveness.
That's what happened with this other one. Actually, the guy, I think he gave up his first place to the second place because he said that the guy had something had gone wrong with the way that the trail was marked, and he went the wrong way, and he would have been first. So he actually gave up his first place for the second.
So there's somewhere there's in that story, it's one of the other.
It could be both.
It could be both. You never know. So, but that is when you think of others
more highly than yourself. So next one, men are pressured to conform. In this day and age, yes, there is a pressure for men to conform to this idea of what it means to be a man. And sometimes it's
all you have to do is watch the Barbie movie, I'm told.
How apparently.
I haven't seen it.
I haven't either.
And I don't think I want to. I've heard so many.
It was too pink to begin with for me.
I like pink. It was too pink for me too. And what? I grew up with Barbie, and it just, the whole premise of what it was, what I'd heard from other people, that I was like, I don't know if this is such a really.
But I feel like they're being pressured to conform in two ways. One, to be more like the uber masculine man, and one to be like this woke-ish version of what they think a man should look like, which is not a man either. Like, I think both of them are wrong. But I think just like we talk with femininity being a spectrum, if you want to talk about spectrum in gender, then this is it. Just like femininity has a spectrum, masculinity has a spectrum. So what on the outside is going to differ from man to man. And I don't think that telling them that they need to
find their feminine side
or become a great athlete, like they're neither of those. There's not going to. So there's going to be men that don't fit in those molds, and that's not fair to ask them to go into.
No. And to say that not to go after the gay community, but for a straight person, if you are faced with a guy who is a little bit more effeminate, does not necessarily equate to that person being gay. I know of many men who are effeminate, but are very men. They're men. They're men. They want to be married. They are married. They have children. They love their wives. They're more artistic. They're more creative.
And again, they don't fit these sort of
They don't fit this mold of
gender mold that they think.
must be like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Or
Do you have a thing for Arnold Schwarzenegger? Because that's like the third time he's mentioned him.
I'm going to the uber extreme.
Yeah.
But if I were to pick what I would think is Chuck Norris, even he's not my ideal guy. I have no idea who my ideal guy would be.
Visibly that way? Okay.
There's too many of them. They're all dark hair and dark eyes. And I don't know.
Asian?
Are they? Oriental? No, not at all. Yes, they are. Sorry.
Another thing that for men, emotional support is often stigmatized. That having close male friends means that you must be gay.
Yeah.
It's that, and I don't just mean like dudes you hang out with or whatever, the boys, or when you actually have those close friendships.
David and Jonathan in the Bible is a really good example because they were closer than brothers. And people, even to this day, will say they were gay. Get off the gay train, okay? Just get off of it.
We are like sisters.
And sometimes closer than sisters. Yeah.
And we're not lesbians.
No. We do not cross that line, nor do we want to.
No.
So
for men, it's to be the same thing. Again, I think I've talked about this before. It's this movie, the show Psych.
Yep.
The best thing about it is that there's two guys who are just like really good friends and they're close friends and they're just, it's like the best thing about it.
Yep. Guys need each other just like women need each other. Without that same sex dynamic. I'm watching the show and there's 1, 2, 3. Is it 3 guys? Yeah, they call themselves the Three Musketeers, which is very cute. And they all have, but they're very close and they all have different dynamics of what they like to do. Like there's these 2 guys, they like to do rock climbing together. They like to do these sport dynamic things together. But then there's this other one where they like to go horseback riding. They like to do other things. Guys like to do, some guys like to do things. Maybe you need a fishing buddy. Find yourself a fishing buddy. There's nothing more therapeutic. And I see that with Marlena's guy, Joe. He goes fishing frequently and he goes, and sometimes he takes his dad. And they go and they have guy time together. So whether it's a father and son, or whether it's an uncle and a nephew, whether it's grandfather and grandson, or brothers or cousins, or just friends, you need that support. There used to be a time where when women stayed home and they would all be hanging up their laundry out on the clothesline outside and they'd be talking to each other over the fence. This is how women used to do that. They'd get together, they'd have coffee, and they'd just talk about their lives. They would talk about the things and it helps to relieve stress. I'm sure counselors have never been so busy as they are now because people do not have a support system where they can talk and alleviate their stress.
And Jesus had his disciples and they weren't held at arm's length. Like he loved them.
Yep. Who's like John was the disciple he loved.
Oh yeah. He loved them all.
He loved them all.
And they were close with him. He had the ones that were even the closest to him that he brought into the inner part of the Gethsemane, right?
Yep. That was Peter, John.
Yeah.
Can't remember who the other, Matthew?
Yeah. Anyway, he had this close-knit community of those support around him.
Yep. So even the son of God needed friends.
Yes.
You gotta have friends. But I think farmer men have more of a community of guys around them because a lot of farmers need other hands to help them on the farm, right?
And there tends to be, and maybe other ones because I'm mostly in the farming community, but a lot of times, like when there's auctions, the farmers don't necessarily go there because they want to buy something. They may do, But a lot of it has to do with the community of people that you're around. You get to see the people. Or like when we had the farm tours where you go in people's barns, half the reason was, you will see the other birds and the other cows and whatever, but you were just meeting with other farmers.
And that sometimes, I don't know with how other churches work. I've been in a few of them and I have seen some of this dynamic, but especially like in our church where they've got coffee stations set out, coffee stations and cups, and coffee's free. And after service, come out, come meet, let's have coffee, let's talk. And people will mill around for a good 45 minutes, just talking and stuff like that and meeting up.
To the kids' chagrin.
Yeah.
Here we go again.
Yep. We want lunch. Feed me. Just a minute. I'm talking. And that's what the men's breakfast used to be about too, right, David? Where the guys would just get together and they would talk. And I think that falls into the next one too.
Yeah, the nurturing positive relationships, because you should have those relationships around you.
Yeah.
And
because nobody is an island.
Toxic masculinity includes disdain for femininity. And that is true.
Yeah.
There is women are lower on the totem pole. They're lesser beings. They're a lot of negative derogatory terms.
Yep.
And there are men who.
Yeah. There are a lot of men who will use this verse, wives, be submissive to your husbands.
Yeah, they don't look at the previous verses.
No, and they're taking it just, if you are more like Christ, you're supposed to give up your life for me. Here's a knife. I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud? But
if you look at Christ, the love he had for the women around him in a time period when women were considered second-class citizens.
Yeah. The perfect example is when he was invited to the Pharisee's house and he was sitting down for lunch. And the woman who she was a sinful woman. Maybe she was a prostitute. People say she was Mary Magdalene. I don't know who she was, but she came in with perfume and she anointed his head with oil and she cried tears on his feet and wiped the tears off his feet with her hair. And the Pharisee complained like, do you know who's touching you? And he said, since I came in here, you didn't even give me a basin to wash my hands with. Yet she has been bathing my feet with her tears and wiping them with her hair. You did not anoint me with oil, but she has poured her most expensive perfume over me. He honored her, a lowly woman, according to this.
And we know
Pharisees.
because of him.
And
even Mary and Martha were beloved to him. And you see it in his followers as people like to say that Paul was very chauvinistic and you're just like, wow, have you seen like the words that he has for women? Like the positive words he has for the women around him?
Yeah. And how honoring he was.
And the fact that he names them in a time period where people would not name women in things.
Yeah. Like Timothy's mother and grandmother, how he learned from them. They are wise. And,
and just.
Yeah. What do you mean he's all patriot? No. Have you read it? You obviously have not read it. Actually, God mentions women a lot in the Bible, even in Christ's genealogy. Women who people would look down on are given a name and a prominence in his genealogy.
Anything to add so far, David?
No, you guys have been nailing it.
Okay.
A lot of these views are going to come from the feminine side, I feel like.
Yeah,
probably.
Because there's only two sides. We don't imply these on ourselves all that often.
No. Usually
from my experience, just not care most of the time. But
So next one is that toxic masculinity tends to have rigid gender roles.
Yeah,
which is very true because there's like the whole pregnant and barefoot, where do women belong?
Yep.
Blah blah blah.
Yep.
I am the man. I wear the pants. All the other, I don't know. Weird sayings you can come up with, and there definitely are men out there like that.
Yep. But along with those kind of attitudes also comes with the power and control and abuse, mental, physical abuse. So if you are a man who is like this, please go and seek help to get rid of that, because that is a very toxic attitude.
And Jesus
never was
told Martha to get back to the kitchen.
No, he actually said that what Martha was the one in the kitchen
okay.
complaining about Mary
Mary,
sitting
oh,
at
yeah,
Jesus'
yeah,
feet.
yeah. So,
And Jesus told Martha that what Mary was doing was the better of the two.
yeah.
So he never said that women should be in the kitchen doing the work and not paying
Attention
to
to it,
him.
or yeah,
Yeah.
there is a certain amount, I think, of there is a sense of gender roles per se that I think God has developed within society, within a family, and things like that, but not so rigid and like domineering as can be,
No,
as has been expressed in the name of the Bible.
because if a man is a true follower of Christ and has the qualities that are described in Galatians, gentleness, perseverance, patience, kindness, and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
who embodies 1 Corinthians 13, a man who is willing to lay down his life, a woman can tell this in a man and would be willing to let him, I will give you, you are my man. If it's so hard to find that because nowadays I think men are afraid to show that side, to be
Yeah.
that way. But but those are such attractive qualities, let me tell you.
And men are discouraged from showing weakness. I think that's true in this day and age. There is like there's that dichotomy of being like the woke man, and then there's the toxic trait man where it's just like like, because we talked about before, it's like there's no emotion. You just stalwart, stoic, all these,
But step up further.
all
He's
these.
not British.
So, and yet we see earlier, we talked about how there is that men do have a strength, but that strength is not,
It's not a power and control strength.
no.
No.
And there's times when men,
you can lean on me, you can rely on me. I will be your front guard.
yeah. And there's times when men do need to say that they need help. And
that should never be frowned upon or
here's
discouraged or
a good
thought
verse.
less of.
Here's Matthew 26:38. Then he, that's Jesus, said to them, the disciples, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." If Jesus could show, and that wasn't weakness in a sense, that was like reality.
Yeah.
This is what I'm going through, dealing and actually facing up with the fact that you need others and you should have these people around you and you can use them to help support you. This is not weakness.
Yeah. Where he prayed and I can relate to the kind of prayer where you pray so hard that it's like your sweat is like drops of blood. And like people say he was sweating blood. I don't think he was sweating blood, but his sweat was so much that it was like he was sweating blood because it came from such a depth of his soul and I know what that's because I was praying like that for my daughter when we were not sure about what was happening with, is she going to live or die? And praying so hard. And when there were times like before when I didn't know if she was going to live or die when she was like 14 and crying so much that it comes from down here. You're just sick inside. You are allowed to feel that because anguish and sorrow will be that way. And if you hold that in, it's going to make you sick. And you need the people around you. And this is why it's good to have the people around you. Because if I didn't have the support of you and of the church and the other people who we all sat together, if I didn't have that, and if we didn't all have each other, can you imagine how hard that would have been? It would have been. Mom said that too. She said she was so glad that I had found you as a friend and that we had this house and I had that support. She says, because I don't know how you would have been able to deal with this had you been living in the condo by yourself.
That's why you have to just be willing to be open.
Yep. We
And
need
vulnerable.
each other. We're not islands.
And then this was true. There are stigmas that prevent men from seeking health care. And this can be physical health care or mental health care.
Yep.
Or spiritual health care.
Or spiritual health care.
So all three of those, because the man is supposed to be.
So where I was focusing more on
Yeah.
spiritual.
But there is a thing about trying to get men to go to the doctor half the time.
Yeah.
Just go get a check. Like, I can't tell you how many times, like, with my dad, trying to get him to go, oh, it's just a little pain in my stomach. Meanwhile, the next day he's having emergencies, hernia surgery. with a strangulated hernia. And I was sitting there, go to the doctor. Don't make me come there. And like I was literally having to go there to help him with the farm because he was having surgery. So
there's a YouTube video that what your story reminded me of is where the ME guy comes in. He says, "So your dad used to go to hospital," and the dad's just like, "No, I'm fine." And the son says, "Just take a look." And the ambulance guy opens up, and there's a bone stick down up his leg.
I'm fine. I'm not ever.
fine, I'm walking off.
Yeah, just walking off.
Yeah, and there is that idea, and you're just like, it's like, and I know men and farmers in general can be like this. I remember talking to one farmer's son, and his dad had hernia surgery, not regular hernia, but it's the regular hernia surgery. But still, you're not supposed to be doing a lot. And he was out in the tractor like 2 days later, and I'm like, you can't keep him down. They're like, no, and it's even to their detriment. There is that idea, guys, it's okay. Take a break, get healed, then get back. Other people are capable of helping out.
Yep.
But also mental health is this idea. No, it's even in the church, Jesus would be enough, and there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not nuts or whatever it is. Go for counseling. These things help a lot.
My brother took until I think it was 10 years ago. Has it been 10 years? Maybe a little bit more than 10 years. Almost lost his family. Almost ended up in divorce until his wife put down the ultimatum: if you do not go and get help, then we are going to get a divorce. I will leave you, because she couldn't put up with it anymore. He was self-medicating, and now the hospital is saying you've come so far, you've done so well, but he had to get pushed like that. Don't get to that point, because you don't
shame in it.
No, you don't want to lose. If you've got a family, don't lose it.
The world has been affected by sin.
Yes,
and your body, physical body, and your mind. Sometimes it has to do with physical things like hormone imbalances, and things like that. That is part of it, but sometimes there is an emotional side of things too.
Yep.
And the spiritual side is like the biggest side. If you aren't willing to hear, there is the point where they say, if your brother is sinning, go to them in person. If you're not going to be willing to hear that, if you're not willing to hear what the church is saying to you, if there is a sin going on in your life, or if you're just going through spiritual difficulties, like going and finding help for that, like you're doubting, you're backsliding, or anything that's spiritual that you're having difficulties in, go to the people who can help you. And that's like, should be a pastor. There may be a care pastor at your church. And this is, again, building up that community around you of people that you can trust.
How many men are walking around living in depression, thinking that they can deal with it on their own? And the next thing you know, they've taken their life because they have decided that they can deal with it on their own, and they don't seek help. When it could be a hormonal imbalance, or it could be some sort of other chemical imbalance, or it could just be
trying to deal with a trauma from the past that you can actually deal with if you open yourself to it.
Yep. And there's help for the worst thing for a family is I never knew they were going through this, because they never said anything and they lived with it on their own. And then all of a sudden they're gone and you don't know why.
Yeah.
And they're left feeling devastated when there could have been some sort of intervention and help. Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to your family. There is no shame in it.
Anything to add on this podcast, David?
Nope. You guys seem to nail the last parts.
I hope that our listeners enjoyed the last few weeks as we've gone through femininity and masculinity, and that hopefully it's helped to open your eyes to maybe things that you are thinking wrongly, or just things you hadn't thought about at all. And hopefully what we've said has resonated with you.
And it's not an exhaustive thing.
There could be a lot more podcasts. Just, we could have went a lot longer.
Yeah, let's not
for that, for their sake. So yeah. Hopefully you've enjoyed listening to this series that we did. And we'll see you all here next time.
Thank you for joining us. Good night.
Good night.
As we conclude this part of the Route 77 podcast, we hope you found our discussion on toxic masculinity enlightening. Our goal is to foster a more compassionate, balanced, and biblically grounded understanding of masculinity. We invite you to listen to our previous series on biblical femininity if you have not already listened to it. Thank you for listening, and may your journey be filled with growth, understanding, and a deeper connection with your faith. And remember to live your single life to its fullest.